Guys, we're back. Episode 8, Pierce's Wildlife Podcast.
Welcome.
What's happening?
It's going to be a fun one. We got a friend on tonight. We got Jordan McDonald on with Seeking Whitetails.
Hey, everybody.
What's going on, man? It's going to be a fun night. We got to do a quick shout out first before we get rolling. We're going to shout Taylor Ryan out for supplying us with the music. We're going to have him on in probably a month or so and let him come on and share his music and tell us a little bit about, you know, how he comes up with his songs and his writing process. That'll be fun.
Absolutely. Thank you,
man.
Taylor.
So, Jordan, we're going to jump on in. We got a lot to talk about. It's going to be fun. You've been hunting for a long time, which is how we met.
Exactly.
We've been working together for quite a few years now.
Yeah, it's been fun.
You've helped us find quite a few deer.
Not too many.
Yeah.
All the deer that Curry shoots with his 44 Magnum.
And
I swear, I think they can run about 40 yards. Curry's like, let's call Jordan.
He's just ready for it.
We've had some good experiences. I mean, we've had some good stories.
Yeah, we've had really good stories.
Absolutely.
And we'll get into those at another time. Because I would say 2 of my favorite stories ever of deer recovery come from being with you.
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
Same here.
I mean,
Definitely top 10. Top 5, probably.
Me too, just going on them. I mean, it's the coolest thing ever.
Hey, a
and
good time
the one was the one you were with us.
Yeah, with the UFO light shining down.
Yep.
It's
Oh,
the
yeah.
coolest thing I've ever seen.
So you've killed some big deer in your life.
Yes.
You also are quite the entrepreneur.
Yes, many businesses.
Yep. It's incredible seeing. I mean, you do it.
Yeah.
And it's cool to watch. You have got some cool stories. A weird story with a Ford truck one time, and you also do some trapping, which is a great deal. Not many people know. We talked about that a couple months ago, and that's a dying art, and it's really cool to see you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what you like. Tell us.
Yeah. So I'm Jordan McDonald. I'm owner and operator of Seeking Whitetails. We've been doing this thermal tracking with drones for the past couple of years. Got to know you and Dwight and everybody else in the community. But we've also, just a little background on me, I've been hunting my whole life. Big bow hunter at the age of 14. Started really putting things together around 2019. It took me a while. I'm 35, about to be 36 now. So from that time to 14 to now, about 2019 is when things started to click. So started putting together some patterns on some really big bucks, started dropping them, and really started noticing a couple nuances with what deer do, how they operate, socialize in the woods, and patterning these deer. And it's led to successfully harvesting 2 very mature bucks every year. And that's my goal, is to harvest the most mature buck that I can.
Fantastic.
So when you say you killed mature deer and patterned some good ones, what would you say your biggest deer that you've harvested with your bow in Georgia and out of state is?
I've got one in Kentucky that's 176. That's the biggest one. Here in Georgia, I've shot one that's 161.
Wow.
It's a giant.
Generally,
It's a giant.
generally about
Nice deer.
2 over 140 every year. So,
That's incredible. So you bow hunting at 14 years old.
yes.
Longbow, crossbow? I mean, for real, like.
No, I just would get out in the yard with my dad. He was a big bow hunter. I shot a couple deer with a rifle at 12. After doing that, my uncle handed me his bow, and I tried.
You remember what it was?
I don't remember, but it was an 80 pound drawback, and
Oh,
you had
wow.
to hold all of it. And so little old me was trying to pull his bow back, and I couldn't do it. But I ended up saving up some money and ended up going down to the Army Navy store over there off 42 that everyone's been to and grown to love. But so anyways, I got my first bow set up, and once we got it set up, I was actually just target practicing with my dad and everything. And then finally he gave me the reins at 14 to go out and shoot my
That's
own deer
incredible.
with my bow. So I had
That's
a compound bow.
That's a pretty big feat at 14 to kill a deer with a bow. Were you by yourself?
Well, I've got a story before that, if you would like to hear that with a bow.
Let's hear it.
All right. So
Yeah.
this is a really cool story, and I haven't shared it with probably hardly anybody, but I'm a little embarrassed to share it, but I'll share it here. So
No hate.
Just
here.
remember,
Trust me.
people do listen.
yeah.
Trust me.
Millions of
You're
listeners.
going to love this. You're
Trust
gonna love
me.
it.
Curry has shared some things on here that are very embarrassing
All right.
about
So
himself.
all right.
Pushing the limit.
So I would come out of the house. We lived on like 2 acres of land at the house that I grew up in. And so it was a long driveway. It was woods on both sides. And I walked out of the house one day to get on the bus, to walk down the driveway, get on the bus, and there was deer in the front yard. And it was the first time I've ever seen deer in the front yard. So little old me, I go to school, and then I'm thinking about these deer that I saw, and I knew my parents weren't going to believe me. So when I got home, there was enough daylight that I started whittling on a bow because I was in Boy Scouts. And so I started whittling on a longbow, got a string together, put a slit on both sides of the stick, got an arrow together, whittled it with my little knife from Boy Scouts. And then the next day I was ready for these deer. I didn't tell anybody about it because I knew I had to kill the deer to prove that I saw the deer. So then I come out the next day, I didn't see those deer. A couple weeks go by, I haven't seen the deer. Well, I come out and I finally see those deer, and I ended up not getting on the bus. I got my bow and I followed the deer into the woods, and I was able to get a shot on a doe. It was a big doe. And so I pulled my little bow back that I made out of a stick and my little arrow out of a stick, and I pulled back and I shot, and it actually bounced off the deer. That was technically my first shot out of a bow at a deer.
But you hit
That's
the
incredible.
deer.
Yeah, I hit the deer.
You
Like,
hit the deer.
it was maybe 15,
That's
20
really
yard shot.
cool.
So yeah,
Wow.
that's how it all
That's
started.
that
She was probably like,
entrepreneur.
what in the world?
Yeah, she was out of there. She blew pretty good.
Turned and looked at
That's
him and
really
laughed.
cool, though.
What'd you do
Yeah.
for a broadhead on that whole main?
There was no,
He just whittled.
it was
I
just
guess,
a whittle,
just a
little point. Yeah.
She's probably like, ah, shit.
Like I said, it kind of just hit and bounced pretty quick. So
Oh,
Hey,
wow.
but at least
That's
you hit
cool,
it.
man.
Yeah.
That is
Curry.
really cool.
Curry would have hit a tree. Or something.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it would have just been flying.
technically my first deer was with a long bow that I made, but I didn't kill it. So I guess my compound's my first one.
There you
That's
go.
awesome. That's
Good
really
story.
cool.
Yep.
Before a gun.
No, that was before the gun. Yeah.
That's
Yep.
cool. There's very
So-
few people that shoot a deer with their bow first before
Yeah.
a gun.
Yep. So I made my bow, and then I shot 2 with a rifle, and then I went to bow hunting at 14.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
That first bow kill at a young age is really cool.
Oh yeah. Definitely went through some experiences, and that's probably where all my tracking started.
I'm sure.
Because when you bow hunt and you're young like that, I took some marginal shots, and then that started the tracking process of trying to find these things. So
Yeah.
I feel like his story
So-
is going to come full circle with the tracking
I
and
know.
all that, and then what
So-
he does now.
Tracking. When you killed your first couple deer with your bow,
Mhm.
did you recover both of those deer?
no,
One of them you did, one of them you didn't?
on the first 2 that I shot with my compound bow,
Yes.
no, I didn't recover either one of them.
Okay.
I took a top of the back shot in between the shoulder blades of a doe, and I didn't get her. And then I shot a buck a little farther back on my second one. It was in the rut, and I didn't get that deer either. So that's when I really started practicing, because I started noticing it's a game of inches with the bow.
Right. And it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible. That's cool. So do you remember looking for blood at that time, or what did you do?
Yeah,
Those
so
first initial
That's
tracks.
that's everything that we would do. I mean, you see which way the deer ran. You get together with a few buddies. It was my dad that we would get together with, and my uncle. And so get together. Where was the deer standing? Where did it run to? We go to where it was standing. There was a little blood there. Went to where it ran to, where I last saw it. There was blood there. So we started tracking the blood. And then eventually, after 100 yards, 150 yards, we run out of blood, and then didn't know which way deer went.
So would you say that could have been a peak of your tracking career?
Oh yeah, because it piques your curiosity about, I know I shot this deer, but now I don't know where it's at. And then you feel real bad because you wounded something, which at the time I didn't know that a deer can recover from a shot. And so through growing in the outdoors, you realize that these deer are very tough animals, and they actually do survive from a lot of those marginal shots.
Right.
So they're very resilient.
It's a disappointing thing, though, to get over there and you're tracking, trying to find the deer, and then you never recover the deer.
That's a heartbreak comment from Texas. If y'all can't tell,
It's a big one.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
I think all of us have had that situation happen.
Yeah,
with
but
the
this
bow.
is recent.
I'm saying, especially with the bow. When I was growing up, I had the same thing happen, and I'm like beating myself up about it. Like,
Yeah.
I've been practicing, I'm perfect, and I felt like I made a good shot, but you still end up not finding it. But it's part of hunting. I mean, and it's hard to get over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he definitely went there. He said, "I'm going to figure it out myself.
Right.
I'm going to figure out how to find these things."
That's
So-
what drove him.
So then you started dog tracking.
Yep.
How old were you when you started dog tracking?
Yeah, I was in my mid-20s, so probably about 23.
Okay.
Started doing dog tracking.
Were you raised around dog tracking, or did you just try to wing it and figure it out yourself?
Growing up, I had a beagle, and it was pretty good about picking up anything I dropped. And then, if I would shoot something and track it, he generally would find it, but I never trained that dog to do any tracking. So he kind of just came naturally of tracking whatever he could.
Awesome. And that dog is what you use to track with?
That dog was originally kind of, but that's not like a dog that I trained to track. Okay. So when I was 23, that's when I started working with my dog. It's a red bone coonhound, and her name's Kimber. So I was tracking with her, and I actually had that dog. I got it from a pound. It was a year old already, but I wanted a tracking dog, but they were too expensive. So I went to the local pound that I saw on Facebook and rescued one. And once I got Kimber house trained and everything like that, then I started taking her in the woods, working with her on some blood, easy tracks. That way she got to get the recovery in, get her all excited. And then from there, we started working on just different things.
So you train this dog how to track, as well as it being instinctual as well.
Right.
Did you train blood, or did you train anything else? Because they say there's 7 glands on a deer. Everyone generally only talks about the interdigital gland. But what's your thought on that and training dogs to track deer like that?
So originally, when I was first tracking with my red bone coonhound, I was just doing blood because that's all I knew when I was training her. And so then you realize real quick that I made a mistake, because you do have these glands and different things. You got hair and markers down the trail that they can use. And one thing that we realized is that when you run out of blood, if your dog's trained to only track on blood, well, any deer that had a blood trail and then it just got sparse, we could find and recover those deer. But the problem is, if it was a gut shot deer and it didn't bleed, how do you find that deer?
Right.
So that's when, of course, Kimber got older and she retired her, get new fresh dogs. And then you realize, okay, I'm going to train this dog on glands, the interdigitals, different things, tarsals, head. And then I'm also going to train that dog to track hair, stuff like that, little markers to where if it's gunshot deer and you don't have any blood and there's hair along the trail, then those are all scent markers for that dog to continue to find that deer.
I do have one question. How old is too old for a dog to learn that stuff?
That gets hairy.
Yeah. I mean,
because like my dog, I take him on, when I kill a deer at the house, I take him with me, and he's surprisingly like gets on the trail. If it's a simple one, I kind of funnel him to it, obviously, to try to get him picking up on it. But I don't know if you can do it if he's 2 years old or 3 years old. Can you still do it?
Yeah, I've got an answer to that I think would be fitting for that. So the chances of recovering, of being a high success recovery rate, will probably not be as good as you had with a trained dog. But we do have to remember that these dogs have instincts to be able to go look for things.
Naturally.
A lot of dogs are curious, and the curiosity is what leads to the recovery. So depending on the breed or how well you know your dog, if you're able to let your dog go and let it be curious, there's a chance that it's going to come up with it. But I would say maybe your 10 to 30% recovery rate versus a trained dog might be 50% recovery rate.
Right.
So there's always a chance that your animal at home can go out and track that deer and do a good job for you because you have that good connection with the dog.
Without all the main training, though, you could just let him go every time you kill a deer. Would that just help him?
Yeah, because you got,
in a general sense,
you got different breeds and you got instincts and stuff like that. So some of the best dogs that I know of, some of them haven't been trained. It's just in their bloodline.
Wow. Interesting.
It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to dog tracking, what would you say the most common signs a dog should focus on, or you should focus on, when it comes to tracking an injured deer?
The biggest thing with dog handlers or people around the dog handler is when the dog gets out of the truck, not everybody try to pet the dog. That dog's there to work. The dog needs to know it's there to work. If you get it hyped up on everything else and get it distracted, then it might not perform as well. So that's initially when you get out of the truck and you're meeting each other and all that. The number 2 thing I would say is, to locate the shot site. That's very important to at least go to the shot site, and hopefully the hunters haven't, stomped it out, moved around, put scent all over the shot site. So we generally like for the shot site to stay clean so the dog can get a good smell of the deer that was there on those glands. But then also if there's any blood on an arrow or blood on the ground from a gunshot deer, then it'll allow that dog to start processing just like we process things. And so it's starting to process like, okay, I'm here to work. All right, now I've got some blood on the ground. That is piquing that curiosity of like, okay, now we're going to go look for that deer. I've been trying to do this. Now we're going to start looking for this blood or this smell from this gland. And so one of the biggest things is to trust the dog. Let the dog go and don't try to control the dog or pull it back, because there's a lot of times where the dog knows which way it wants to go, but we think as humans that there's no way the deer went that way. Let the dog do what it wants to do, because if you try to pull that dog back, then you can reduce your chance of recovery because you're going against it. And then eventually the dog just gives up because it's not doing what it wants to do.
It's useless.
Yeah. And so if you let the dog control the situation, the environment, and you've already worked with the dog and you've trained this dog, then it knows what it needs to be doing. Now, there is some factors and different things where you might have to reset them, but generally speaking, you let that dog get curious and he knows what he's there to do, or she, and then you're going to be able to have a very successful time in the woods with your recovery.
Would you say, and I'm not going to jump too far ahead here, but would you say that you would ask your hunter questions with a dog as well, like you would drone recovery?
Yeah, absolutely. Questions up front are always very important because you don't want to waste anybody's time. You can talk to people. I'm not saying vet every call or anything like that, but there is certain particular shots where you're definitely not going to find those deer, and you don't want to just be taking somebody's money or wasting everybody's time. But one of the things too is to have that conversation up front, because the call's free. So you don't need to worry about a price if you got a call and you just need some knowledge on how you should handle the situation after a shot. If you think it's not a good shot, it's probably not a good shot. Don't ever rush a track. Give it time. Make sure there's time, because one of the biggest things I see, and I was guilty of this in the beginning too, in the tracking, is you want to get to that call because no one's going to wait, to wait on you. But the biggest thing is to give the deer enough time, because generally we're going after an injured animal and that deer is not ready for you to be there. So therefore you're just pushing the track instead of allowing things to play out the way they need to be. And if you give it enough time and the hunter understands that, then it's going to increase your chances of recovery. And that's everything. If you rush the track, you might only get 10% recovery. If you give it enough time, if you bump it up to 50% recovery rate because you gave it enough time with a hunter, it's all about what you do after the shot, and you start processing these things that allow you to increase your chances for recovery.
I like it.
So talking about percentages for a second, which, and I'm gonna correlate this to your drone recovery in a little bit. What would you say your recovery percentage is with your dogs?
Currently or in the past?
Let's say currently.
Well, I haven't been running them currently, so probably about 10 to 30% because they're house dogs now.
Yeah. So what about in the past?
In the past, so
When you were running them?
50% recovery rate
Okay.
is really, really good.
And 50%, is that you going out there or even taking the phone calls?
If you're not vetting the phone calls, that's what's giving you the 50% recovery rate.
Okay.
You can increase that rate if you're vetting the calls.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there a certain giveaway that the dog or you talking to the hunter when you get there that you realize that you're probably not going to find this deer?
So one of the biggest things that I see when I get out to these tracks is you have this conversation on the phone. They tell you everything about what they saw, how the deer acted, and then you get this plan together thinking that, okay, they're going to hold out for me to get there. I've got 45 minutes till I get there. And then you get to the track and everyone's not at the camp where you agreed to be at. And so they're still out looking for this deer. And they've already put this scent all in the woods.
Oh,
they didn't
wow.
back out
Yeah,
like they
that's not
said they were
good.
going to do. And so you're like, well, that didn't go. Well, then you have other calls where you get to the track and they didn't tell you that they shot it yesterday, and the truth starts coming out.
Oh, no.
And so they've already had 2 other dogs in here. This deer was shot yesterday. This wasn't tonight.
Wow.
And, honesty is very important. We're trying to increase your recovery rate, not decrease it. And then at the same time, we don't want to be wasting anyone's time because we have other calls that we could actually be recovering deer instead of not recovering deer.
Right.
So it's always good to be honest and upfront about all the details that you know of. And then if you do come up with a plan with a tracker, stick by that plan. Don't try to jump and bring another dog in real quick and then have another dog. It just gets to be a mess.
How did you learn this? Is it self-taught, or did you get some training somewhere or something? Or
Yeah, so in my background of hunting and tracking and everything like that, I was introduced to the outdoors and hunting and fishing with my dad. And then after that, I was always asking, do you want to go? Do you want to go? And he's like, no, I don't want to go. If you want to go, just go. So then I would go because I'm curious. You see a big deer walk by you, but you didn't get a shot on it. Well, I want to know where that deer went. So I started walking woods, different things like that. And so a lot of everything that I've done is because of my own curiosity in the outdoors and being self-taught.
all right,
That's pretty impressive.
that is good.
So, like, as far as like when I the people I've called for dogs, it's all off the DNR website. It's like a hub where there's 1,000 people with their phone number on there. You just call someone who covers your county.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything about that? Are you on that, or how do you get on that?
All of my business has always been word of mouth.
Well,
I'm not familiar with the
that
DNR
makes a
dog
lot of
list.
sense because
I didn't even know that was available.
yeah, it's
honestly,
like
I've always
I just Googled deer tracker Georgia and it pulled up on the website. But the guy I called, this guy was a trip. So he comes out there, pulls up 2 hours late from when he told me he was going to be there, which is fine. I know he's busy. He's tracking. So I had someone on my property had shot a deer. I took him out there. I didn't go push anything out. I tried to do everything right. Didn't take my dog out there. And I showed him where it was. It wasn't a great shot that whoever, I don't even remember who it was that made the shot, but it wasn't a good shot. I go out there and he's like, all right, I'll send this. He lets the dog out of the truck when he gets there. Dog's running into my yard, in my neighbor's yard. I'm like, you got him? No collar, GPS, nothing. I'm like, you got him? He's like, yeah, he'll come. Oh, come on. Like, I can already tell he has no control over him. So he hooks him up to a leash. I'm like, thank God. And then we get on the ranger. I take him back there. I'm like, this is the spot we shot at. And he said, all right. He's like, find him, find him, find him. And the dog's like looking at him and he's like, find him. And then finally the dog takes off running. He takes off running. So I take off running. I'm running behind him. I'm like, did he get him? I don't know what's going on. And dude, we ran for hundreds of yards down this hill, and there's a creek, and we got across this creek. Well, he's in front of me, and that dog hits that creek, and he's got him in tow like he's skiing behind him with a damn leash, and he eats shit in the creek. The handler, the dog keeps skiing. He's gone.
Okay, he's out of here.
And so I'm like, I'll run up there. I'm like, you good? And he's like, yeah, I'm good. He's covered in mud. I'm like, you gonna be able to get the dog back? He's like, yeah, we'll figure it out. So then he's like, just take him back to my truck, which is a long way away. So I take him back up there. I'm like, the whole time thinking like, what about the dog? Like, I'm not even concerned about this doe at this point. I'm like, just leave him. I just want to be away from this dude.
What an experience.
Where's the dog?
Gone. He kept going. So I get back to the truck and he's like, all right, man, I'm sorry. And I'm thinking like, damn, your dog's still out there, buddy. And he starts patting his pants and he's like, oh, my phone. I don't have my phone. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I had it with me. I don't have my phone.
It's in the creek.
So we go back there and look for an hour. And then I'm finally like, all right, do you have an Apple ID? He goes, so I can Find My iPhone. I said, I'll sign into it. He said, I got one. I don't know the password though. I said, well, can you guess? Give me an email and guess. And he goes, I don't know, maybe try one. I'm not kidding you. This is not a joke. He says, try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, are you kidding?
Exclamation point.
And I type it in and it logs in. And I'm like, that was it. Wow. And I'm like, oh, here it is. It's logged right here. So we walked back there using the map, found his phone. And at this point, I'm like, please just leave. Just get out of here. And I'm like, hey, man, what about the dog? The dog's not here.
Still no dog.
Yeah.
He goes, she's got a collar on her, my address on it. Somebody will call. And he leaves my house.
How much was this on tips? Dog guys, they like.
Dude, let's just go ahead and say I wasn't paying him anything.
It's a free entertainment that night.
Like, even if he hung out for a minute, like, gave you that look about the tip, I'm not tipping. You left your dog on my land, dude. Your dog is gone. And I never heard anything about it. I just said that.
Was he cross-eyed?
He's trying to make money on the reward, huh?
But I'm just saying, I think I could probably get on that list for dog tracking with my boykin.
Yeah, I don't know what they do to that process.
I wonder if he ever got his dog.
Was it you? You look
No,
familiar.
no, definitely not me.
You look super familiar.
No.
You got a scar on your right
No,
arm?
that's the wrong dog.
Was your dog named Lucky?
No.
Oh, shit.
Got a
Maybe
nicer
it was
truck, I
Biscuit.
think.
It might have been Biscuit.
The biscuit is gone.
What kind of truck was he in?
Toyota Tacoma, like
Oh.
every other one is.
Yeah,
Every dog tracker's in the
No.
Tacoma.
I got a Ford.
It's funny.
Oh, that's funny.
It's pretty new Ford though, ain't it?
Yeah.
It is drone recovery now.
Yeah, no more dog boxes, just lift kits and tires and wheels.
Yeah, nice drone in the back.
Speaking of dogs, y'all hear about that story in South Carolina? A dude was on his property hunting, and 2 dogs were quote unquote hunting dogs. They weren't hunting, but they ran across his property, and the dude shot the dogs. Well, the guy who owned the dogs apparently sued this guy. Well, the guy who shot the dogs lost the case, ended up having to pay $132,000
Whoa.
towards those dogs and that family.
Well, that's why you don't hire a public defender.
Yeah.
How much do you think your dogs are worth?
I mean, here's where I'm at in the situation. I want to be real for about 30 seconds.
All right.
Okay.
There is a very fine line of that whole situation. If my dogs are on someone else's property, I'm going to be honest with you. They should not be on that property,
That's right.
period.
Curry was the guy in the case.
Nope,
No.
not in the case. This is South Carolina. But here's the deal. Do I want someone to shoot my dog? No. I hope that they call me or at least try to shoo my dogs off, because I understand dogs roam.
Shoot
Just
over
like we
'em.
talked about,
Right.
your dog's nose once those hit the ground. I mean, but the point is it's a hairy situation because I also had dogs running through my field while I was deer hunting.
Mhm.
That is my property. If these dogs are on my property, they should not be there. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to go shoot a dog.
Right.
I'm just not going to.
Yeah.
But also, these hunting dogs shouldn't be on my property.
Well, have they been there repeatedly or just?
Right. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
we
a
don't know
weird
the backstory.
situation, because I understand both sides. I mean, I don't want someone's dogs on my property, but I understand if my dogs get on their property, they don't want them there either. So it's just a weird situation. But
Yeah, there's a lot going on with that because the guy that had to pay for the dogs, I mean, there could have been hunter harassment there. I mean, we don't know the whole backstory about
That's right.
how many times those dogs he's seen while he's hunting, and then he got tired of it. He could have been harassed as a hunter. So,
You never
But if
know.
it's a cat, shoot it every time.
oh, no. Jeez.
They're ferocious.
But, just to circle back, close that up, either way, it's not right on both sides. It just sucks. But $132,000 is crazy money.
Wow.
Hey, man's best friend.
Must
So
have
it's
been
got to
one
be
of
worth
those-
something.
Was it
I
one of
love
those
my
show
dog too
dogs?
now. I'm just.
Was it a show dog that like jumps the things and
I don't
runs through
know.
the tunnel really fast?
I don't know what it was. So during the winter time, during hunting season, would you say your number one?
Yeah, my number one focus is recoveries when it comes to deer hunting. I'm either deer hunting or I'm recovering deer.
Okay. So
Oh, you're a hero at that time, dude. I'm telling you.
for sure.
We're ready. I mean,
Absolutely.
we want to make sure that if you are in need, we're available to be able to help you. And if we're not available, I'm going to have somebody else that I know that is just as good to be able to help you.
Absolutely.
So the thermal drone recovery, when would you say you first learned about it, and what kind of piqued your interest on it?
So I learned about it around 2019, maybe 2020 with the thermal drone recovery. It was actually out in Kansas. A guy had one. I had never even seen it. I mean, they deployed this drone on a deer on a guided hunt, and I thought it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. But at the time, the drones were like $30,000, $40,000, and this was just a guy that had one for the company he worked for. And after that, I only saw one recovery happen, but I actually saw a recovery with a drone. And so that sparked that interest. And then a couple of years went by, and then finally I started seeing some thermal drones on the market again, and I researched it, and I actually saw that they had a lot cheaper version, and it was one that is still very expensive. But after thinking about it and seeing it in person in Kansas, which I knew people had never seen that done before, and seeing how it operated, it really started my wheels turning with my tracking experience from the dogs and all the deer that we've shot throughout my life and how beneficial it could be. That's when Seeking Whitetails started coming together, and we were able to create the drone company. And also a little bit of background about that is that I wasn't just fresh to flying drones. I was flying drones for looking at roofs and inspections and stuff like that. So I was already very familiar with how to operate the drone. And then the thermal camera just comes about because you coyote hunt, thermal cameras. Now I've got one in the sky, tracking experience, stuff like that. And that's how Seeking Whitetails really started to develop.
What year was it that you started Seeking Whitetails?
That was 2 years ago. Now we're going into our 3rd year.
Okay.
You keep saying we. When you say we, what are you meaning by we started this?
It's me. Basically,
I thought
me
it
and my
was.
wife, I don't know. But no, I'm the owner operator. I fly the drone. Don't have anybody else that operates. So it's just me.
Everyone
Okay.
says that.
He
Yeah.
does what we do.
We do.
I
we
say
we
the
say
same
we.
thing.
I
is
say
everything.
I think that's a Southern thing.
I
It
think
is
it
a
is.
thing, and I think it matters.
Yeah.
You know,
I
'cause
say we'll
Right.
be out there Monday, and I show up.
Yeah.
And
at
You're
the
by
end of the
yourself.
day, you're getting support from your wife too to back you
Yeah.
on stuff like this too. So
It's all a
I'm
team.
gathering is
Yep.
it's kind of
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a
So
team.
it's appreciation too as well.
his
Mhm.
wife flies the drone for him, and he just manages it.
Yeah. Because, I mean, everything in life is not just by yourself.
Absolutely.
I mean,
You gotta have
everything
support.
around you is going to be somebody else involved, whether it's a small part or a big part.
Yeah.
So
That's
I
right.
guess that's just Southern in me to say we.
It's me and the
I
Lord.
think it's fantastic.
Me and the
There you
Lord
go.
are doing.
Hey, I still say yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this may be a weird question, but how long would you say it took you to get good?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked. So when I received my drone, the first thing was, how much different is this? Because I had a DJI drone, and this is a DJI unit that Matrice 30T is what I'm running. And so it's a lot bigger drone. I wanted to see if it operated the same as the controls that I was already used to. Thank God it did, because that could have been a learning curve. So having that prior knowledge of flying a smaller DJI Mavic allowed me to pick up the Matrice 30T. Now there was a lot of settings and stuff that I had to go through. So initially it was get in the air, see what this thermal looks like in the sky, looking down and stuff like that. And then immediately it wasn't like looking for deer. The first things I'm looking at is like dog in the yard. Want to see what that looks like. Looking at myself, what's that look like? Then looking at cattle in a cattle field, easy targets that you can start training your brain on the anomalies, because we call those anomalies the objects that we see.
Yeah, good
And
word.
what a live cow looks like, what a laying down cow looks like,
All right.
what a standing dog looks like, laying down dog looks like on the thermals, just training your eyes. And so then it was mostly just fields at first. You're just flying fields. Then it was, well, how much can I see in this one view as I'm flying in a straight line at 200 feet, 300 feet, 400 feet? What is my field of view? So then I started taking notes on stuff like that, and I'm self-training myself with this drone because I'm at the forefront pioneering this thing. I want to be the best that I can be with the drone. And so then you start doing all these little tests to be able to be efficient come hunting season. So then now I'm looking at deer in the fields, with the thermal and stuff like that. Now I'm transitioning into the woods. Does the deer look around pine trees? What do they look like around oak trees? What do they look like in a clear cut? Just doing those things and
Wow.
training your eye on the remote to be able to pick up all those little nuances that you would miss if you weren't doing those training flights. So a lot of time training.
What would you say your most preferred foot is?
I'm a flying
Mhm.
my altitude.
Right.
My most preferred footage that I like to be at, it's about 320 feet.
Okay.
Anywhere 300, 320 seems to be pretty key, because when I'm doing these recoveries, look back through my videos and stuff, and it seems like I find more deer in that 300 to 320 mark. And it's the field of view, the clarity, different things at night that allow me to be able to run that.
Speaking of that, when I was with y'all and y'all were recovering Curry's deer,
Sure.
you flew up. I said, "How do you know where the trees are? You're flying over these trees full speed. How do you know where they're at?" He goes, "Already calculated it."
Yeah.
I'm like,
So
"What?"
when I first get on site, that was part of my training of the self-training, is I wanted to see how tall trees were. So 100 feet, you're above the trees.
Right.
And so I knew that I was clear, even if I had tall trees and stuff like that. I mean, I knew as long as I'm 100 feet, then I'm above any tree, except for like mountain terrain and stuff like that. You got to be careful.
So we talked a little bit earlier on percentages of dog recovery.
Yes.
This is going to be a 2-part question.
Okay.
What would you say your percentage is on, we got to be careful saying deer recovery because a lot of times you find deer that are probably not recoverable.
Right.
So what would you say your percentage is on locating the injured deer?
So locating, yeah, this is a loaded question. Depends on if you're like vetting the calls or not vetting the calls. If you're not vetting the calls, you never know really what the situation is because if the hunter's being completely honest or not when you get there. So it's hard to judge that. I would say 85% of the time you're able to locate an injured deer. And that's that, there's a lot of things that go into this recovery process with a drone. It's a little different than a dog. If a dog gets out of the truck and it doesn't find the deer, then that's a lost recovery. I tend to follow up with all my clients. I know dog guys do too. Follow up with your clients to find out what happened with that recovery. So did they get a trail camera picture of the deer a couple days later, a month later? Was that deer found dead later? I mean, sometimes that happens. It's just natural process. I mean, it happens with me. There could be a missed recovery and I want to know every detail about it because we're human. We make mistakes. Dogs make mistakes all the time. I think we heard one story about that.
When you say vetting the hunter, what do you mean by that?
So like when you vet the calls, so like say I have a guy that calls me and he says, I shot it right behind the shoulder and it high leg kicked and there's blood everywhere on the ground. Like you're going to find that deer. Like it's probably 200 yards. Right. Now, if you have another one where I knocked the deer on the ground, I shot it with a rifle, I knocked it on the ground, it laid there for 3-4 seconds, jumped back up and took off. That's a spine shock. You temporarily paralyze the deer.
So you're
through
just
the
getting
back straps.
data is what you're saying.
Yeah, just gathering data. And that's from experience on all the recoveries over however many years it's been. Right. A lot.
So we talked about vetting for a second.
Right.
What would be your process and some questions that you might ask for vetting for a drone recovery that you might not ask or that you might ask for a dog recovery?
So one of the things with the drone is we want to be, this is completely opposite of the dog recoveries. So with a drone recovery, we're not putting any pressure on the land. We're not putting any pressure on the deer. So therefore we want to be there as soon as we can to be able to get as close and personal with the deer as possible before it gets too far away. It's not saying that if it gets far away that we still can't find the deer. What we want to do is we want to get there soon enough to identify the shot. So if we can find that deer within 250 yards and it's in its first bed, we can determine that shot and determine the next steps. So do we need to go finish this deer? Do we need to back out on this deer and give it more time? Give it 8 hours and we'll come back tomorrow. Right. We have a pin on where this deer is. Let's let it lay overnight and then we'll come back and see if that deer's still right there. That way we're not going in, being intrusive and pushing a deer that's not ready.
Makes sense.
Another thing is we're able to look at the deer. Dwight, you had one.
Yep.
Got shot deer and the deer standing there. And had you continued to track that deer, you would have kept pushing that deer for probably hours.
Never found
You'd have lost that deer.
Yep.
And
absolutely. And one of my biggest
with the drone, what we were able to do in that particular situation is I was looking at the deer's body language. So that deer was hunched up. He was gut shot, but he wasn't laying down. His tail was straight out and it was twitching left and right like crazy. But you could tell that deer was shutting down. His body was shutting down, but he hasn't even laid down. And that was 4 hours after the shot?
Yes.
4 hours after the shot. And this deer standing on its feet, kind of with his legs spread out, with his tail straight out, twitching left and right. So we opted to back out, give it some more time. We get back on the deer a couple hours later, and there he is laying on the ground. And it was time to go recover.
Yeah.
So we got a pin, we go in, we get the deer, we come out.
And that's so a story for
the first time ever, we're actually getting live visuals of what deer do after the shot versus when we're tracking with dogs, we don't really know because our dogs are running the deer until they expire or they're baying them up for a finishing shot. So therefore, we're actually gathering data on what a deer does after the shot. And it's been very beneficial. And it's not all perfect yet, but dogs have been running deer for thousands of years.
Right.
I mean, this is something that's been around a long time and people have grown to trust the dog. That's why I don't think they trust the drone as much because it's new. They've never seen it done.
Right.
Dogs have been around thousands of years. It's kind of like it's come down through genetics. Everybody talks about that's the way to find a deer. Well, now that this is new, we're collecting data every year, every track, taking down these notes, collecting data. And that data is only going to get better and better and better to where when someone calls, this is exactly what your deer is going to do. And there's patterns that we've already seen with these deer. These deer don't run circles. If you see the deer run straight line, that deer is going in a straight line.
Right.
It's only when you start pushing that deer, they start circling.
Which from now on, I will not even consider dogs.
Yeah.
I mean, ever since dealing with you the first time.
Well,
Right.
again, that's technology.
And to
I mean,
each is their own.
yeah,
I mean,
right.
you have the choice of a dog. You have a choice of a drone. If you want to use all the resources you can to recover the deer and increase your chances of recovering a trophy that you've been after for years,
Right.
then there's another option.
Right.
Yeah, you don't even take a chance on some of those deer. You're like, man, he ran off. I'd just rather call Jordan. Yeah,
I know,
I don't
really.
want to take a chance. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, these
even
are
though I
deer of
felt
a
like it was a
lifetime.
good shot, you know, you never know. I mean,
Now, if it's a doe,
I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. You've been after this deer. You've watched this deer on camera for 3 years.
Right.
This is a trophy buck. That's why you're calling a dog in or you're calling a drone in. This is a trophy animal, something that you've invested your money in, lots of money, land, corn, food plots, stands. You've invested in this, taken time away from your family. There's no reason to mess it up on the track.
absolutely.
So therefore, what you do the minute after that shot is if you bring that deer back home that you've invested all this time and money into.
100% worth it.
As far as the drones go, just to make it as quick as you can on the answer, but I'm just confused. As far as property lines go with dogs and stuff, I was curious to know, like, what's your limitations on where you can go? If it, like I hunt a lot of small properties. So if I call you and it's on someone else's property, what are the steps there? Do you have to get permission?
So when you're tracking with a dog and you're in tight property lines and tight quarters like that, you have to get permission from each property owner to be able to go onto their land with a dog. That's when you've got your dog on a leash. You can't run open collar and stuff like that. And it can become a dangerous situation like we talked about,
Right.
where you can get your dog on another property and the dog can get shot. That's not good because at the end of the day, these tracking dogs still are family animals that we bring home to our families and our kids play with. Now with the drone, it's completely different. And that's what makes the drone recovery even better because in Georgia, we don't have big parcels of land anymore. Everything's real chopped up with the property lines.
Right.
And the beauty of the drone is we can get up in the air. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, allows us to fly in the sky. That's what we have a license for. And so nobody owns the sky. And so we can fly multiple properties. We can look wherever we need to look. And the beauty of the drone is you're not having to go ask 10 people that now know you hunt there. If you wanted to keep it discreet, you go and ask one property owner because we have a pin on the deer and it either needs to be finished and we ask for that, or we have a pin on the deer we located with a drone and we're just asking for permission to recover. And so you're asking one person instead of waking up a whole neighborhood or anything like that.
This guy's the best person
Have you
I've
been
ever
in that
met.
position before?
At answering
Oh, yeah.
questions, he's the best person to answer.
So I got
perfect answer.
an awesome story. One that happened this past deer season is I was up in a very populated area, north side of Atlanta. And this guy, I feel so bad for him because first couple years of bow hunting, I think he had a crossbow. And deer in the backyard, shoots him with the crossbow. He's got his license, everything like that. Everything's legal, just doing a little deer hunting in the backyard. Shoots this deer. Well, he ended up tracking a little soon and he jumped the deer. So he jumps the deer. Then he calls me, says, look, there's people everywhere. I just want you to come out here and see if you can find this deer that I shot. I'm pretty sure I liver shot it. And I said, okay, no problem. So generally, might go down the creek, wooded area, no big deal in the subdivision. This deer did something completely different. I get up in the air. I'm looking at all these deer. There's like 40, 50 deer in the subdivision.
Wow.
And I mean, loaded with deer. I'm spending more time counting deer.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, man, where's this deer at? And I can't find this deer. I'm looking all over the place. This deer ended up being in someone's backyard in their fence and he's still alive, liver shot. So now
in a fenced in area.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So now he had the obligation of, we know where the deer's at. It's in this person's backyard. They're home. Their lights are on at home. You now have to go to that homeowner, knock on their door, say, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, I'm here and I need to finish a deer in your backyard that's in your fence
Wow.
and recover it. Is that going to be okay? And I said, have you ever done anything like this before? And he's like, I've never had to do this. And I'm like, well, you are today.
Today's a new day.
Today's the day.
How'd you
It
know?
just-
How'd you know it was back there? We flew a thermal drone. Over
Yeah.
So did they let him in?
Yeah, they actually let him in, and he ended up finishing the deer in their backyard, and he got a recovery
How
out
did
of
they
it.
feel about that?
Oh, they were not happy, but
Yeah, I bet.
it is what it
Did they
is.
give him some meat at
Oh,
least?
well.
Oh, Lord. They're probably land lovers, deer, animal lovers.
Hey,
That's a hard
at the
one.
end of the day, we got the recovery, and that's all that mattered. So
I mean, when you've been in those situations before, I'm sure that are most people cooperative and let you go in on their property if you ask.
we had a situation this year or this past season that the hunter got cussed out. The police were called.
Oh, no.
We tried to fly a drone. We got run off with a drone. We tried to come back with a drone, and the neighborhood wasn't happening. He ended up losing permission, and we ended up recovering the deer, but we had to act like a wildlife recovery expert.
Wow.
All right, here we go. 2 more questions.
Who polished that top?
I know, yeah. I just took the old buzzer to it.
So cool.
2 more questions,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to lead off with this one. What would you say the most common mistake people make is when people use the thermal drone recovery for deer?
Number one mistake when using the thermal recovery. They haven't spent any time. They went straight to Amazon, bought a drone, and acted like they can have a recovery service.
Okay.
So
I can see that.
They haven't even they're not even deer hunters or tracking. So
I have
they
a
don't
DJI.
have experience.
I have a DJI Mini. I just wrecked it 2 months ago, making a TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
making a video, ran it right into a tree.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You got to practice.
I
I've
just
heard
wrecked mine
so
a
many
couple weeks ago.
stories from other hunters of I hired a drone guy. He come out here. He come up with an excuse immediately of how to get back home, and he crashed his drone.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Yeah, and
Oof.
your drone's a little more expensive than ours when you crash it.
Yeah.
yeah.
My drone I can replace for $7,000 to $1,000.
Well, mine came with extra wings and stuff.
Yeah,
your wings are like 2 feet
Yeah.
long.
yeah.
Yeah. It's not
That's
a good
pretty good
day
size
if I
unit.
crash my drone.
So last question,
Mhm.
and I kind of have a feeling of what your answer is going to be, but I'm going to ask it anyways. What would you say the most challenging environment that you've had to recover in, and how did the drone perform, and what was the outcome?
Okay. So most challenging environment generally is when there's a party of 20 standing there waiting on me to show up.
Holy cow.
But there's one in particular that stands out, and that was a deer recovery for you.
Yeah, I kind of had a feeling.
And it was in the fog, the worst conditions you can
Oh,
ever
that's
fly
terrible.
in.
And the rain.
And rain. We had rain, fog. We had every worst condition you can have. And I told you on the phone, like, hey, this is going to be slim pickings here
Mhm.
because the drone camera can't see great, but we do have thermals.
And then the comment you made also was, I do have tracers though. We can still have fun.
Yeah, if we don't recover the deer, we do have tracers that we can shoot, but it actually worked out. We actually got up above the trees, and we did have heavy fog, but the thermals actually picked up through the fog, and we were able to locate the deer. We located several deer, and then we found yours in the middle of a swamp and actually had to finish that deer. So
Yep.
That was the night you walked out with it on your shoulders, right?
Yeah, that was that night.
that's the first time
Hey,
I've
and
ever
I
seen
will tell
Curry
you-
scared in the woods.
Yeah.
I haven't known this guy long, but I did watch him shoot a rabbit at 300 yards that night.
Pretty good shot.
Yeah.
I'm
We
telling
were
you.
all like, nah, there's no way. And I was like, oh, yep.
He
He
smoked
got
it.
it.
He got
I mean, there was blood went everywhere. And
Yeah. Yeah, that happened too. But seeing Curry standing there in the swamp with a live doe by himself
he looked like
And-
Rambo down there.
and letting him take his shot.
He was circling it. Didn't you choke that one out?
No.
No.
That's a different deer.
All right, guys. We're going to have to wrap this one up on that. Jordan, we thank you for coming on this week, man. We really appreciate you making the time out of your busy schedule, and we really appreciate you coming out. If you
Absolutely.
guys have any questions for Jordan, please feel free to write them out in the comment section, and we'll answer that the next time he's on. And we appreciate you, really.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Hey, don't forget, if it makes you shake, don't wait, don't hesitate. Shoot that thing.